Well,
what's up, hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Pod Snipe Celly, your home for NHL news, notes, talkers, and more. My name is Dan Bradley. Alongside me tonight, Joel Fernino. Joel, how you doing, my friend?
You switched it up on me there with that word play intro. Wow,
A little bit.
I like it. I like it.
It's
I'll take it.
borrowed, expired podcast that I used to be a part of. So,
Shh, no. Just say you thought of it, and that's it.
I thought of it for that show too.
Oh,
it's still me.
Okay, well,
so
no, just you did it for this show and the show alone. All right, anyway.
I
am doing well, Daniel. How about you? How you doing? Oh God, that sounded weird. I just called you Daniel.
Yeah, calling me Daniel, it's a weird thing. So,
anywho, we move on. How you doing?
Yeah, doing all right here. We are, of course, on a Monday show tonight. A little bit different than how we would normally do things, but
is today Monday?
That is, of course, because tomorrow at roughly this time, I will be boarding a plane. So, so we're going to do the show tonight instead.
Yes, and that is to yours and Michelle's honeymoon, and I will toast you with, I was telling you, a bottle of whiskey I haven't cracked open in over a year. So,
yeah, I bet that stuff's got to be really good right about now. Getting better with age.
I don't think there's. Oh yeah, I don't think there's any copyright issues here. It's just it's Metallica's whiskey.
Yeah, well, I don't know why we'd run into any problems with that.
No, I mean they're two of our favorite bands, so
Exactly.
So to you and Michelle going on your honeymoon, where are you guys going?
We are going to go to France. So we have a
no big deal.
No big deal.
No big deal whatsoever. No.
So we're going to be going from Paris to Normandy.
That's
just shy of 10 days. I think it's like 8, but then when you factor in the travel days, it's 10. So it should be a really cool trip. We've got a ton of awesome stuff. I'll have tons of pictures when I get back, but not going to upload anything from over there. But yeah, we're really looking forward to it. It's going to be just an outstanding time. I've never actually left the country.
I was about to ask, have you left the country? And yes,
no.
Mexico counts. Like I've only ever been to Mexico, so
I haven't even been to Mexico. So
Canada.
First time with international. I haven't been to Canada. That may surprise a lot of people who.
It's the same with me. I've never been to Canada, and that probably surprises many people.
Well, especially for me as a Minnesota guy with Canada right there.
Yeah.
You call it South Canada all the time.
I do. That's not just a joke. It's not just a joke to make you a little flustered. It's not necessarily wrong either.
So, yeah, that's where things are at. But
badass.
We've got a busy but fun show lined up for you tonight. For those who tuned in last week and caught our Chicago Blackhawks offseason.
I do that as I'm wearing a Golden Knights hat.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate you not wearing a Hawks anything on Wild Night.
I thought about it. I very much thought about it. I still have not.
I know you did.
New Hawks hat yet, so.
In fairness to me, I am wearing a green shirt, but it is not Minnesota Wild related, other than just the color.
Yeah, so wait, why are you I mean, I didn't wear a Blackhawks related thing last week. Did I?
What did I did.
What did I wear?
I'm pretty sure you were wearing the Bedard jersey.
No, that was when I bought it the day after we did our draft reaction show. I didn't wear it last week.
I could swear you were wearing something Hawks last week. I'd have to go back and check the tape, and I'm not going to do that while we're live.
I specifically remember it only because I was like, I should wear something Hawks related. And then I got home from the office and was like, nah, I'm too lazy.
Either way, this is kind of our Wild off-season review show. We're still going to get to preview shows a little further down the line. But just for the Wild fans to kind of recap where things are at, it's been a pretty busy off-season so far. The Wild did bring in Patrick Maroon. However, they also released quite a few names here. Oscar Sundqvist, Mason Shaw, Sam Steele, Matt Dumba, Ryan Reaves, John Klingberg, and Gustav Nyquist. So some big transitions. And we knew that with the cap crunch that they're going to be under the next couple of seasons, 14.7 mil of dead cap this season, there were going to be some casualties along the way. And a lot of these guys, Sundqvist, Nyquist, Klingberg, All of those guys brought in at the trade deadline last year to kind of boost a potential playoff run. Ryan Reaves acquired during the season as well. Sam Steele brought in before the season Matt Dumba, one of the alternate captains. And then Mason Shaw, who has been through more knee injuries than any person should ever go through in their lifetime, dealing with yet another ACL tear. It sounds like there is still a spot for him in the Wild organization at some point, should he come back. However, after this many injuries like that, and with the timeline for a return, the Wild just couldn't give him that security right now. So while I think there's still a path for Shaw to come back, everybody else on the released list, as far as I'm concerned, is probably gone for good at this point. Nyquist signed with Nashville. Ryan Reaves has signed elsewhere. Sundqvist signed with St. Louis. And Klingberg went to Toronto with Reaves.
Yeah, Reaves and Klingberg in Toronto is, I mean, I like Ryan Reaves. I've liked him even when he was a Blue, but I like him. I feel bad for him. He's going to a team that's clearly just going to choke like they always do again, because when you're a team that desperately needs defense and your biggest free agent defenseman signing is John Klingberg, yeah, something tells me you don't know what you're doing up there.
Yeah, noted defensive specialist John Klingberg.
Yep, totally. Yep, absolutely. But I mean, you also got rid of secret agent man, as I called him, Sam Steele.
Mm-hmm.
He sounds like there was a, you remember, it was an old cartoon when we were kids, Max Steel. Remember that?
Not ringing any bells for me.
No, well, never mind that, I guess.
That's all good.
Sundqvist, yep, that's a rough one. And future Blackhawk, Matt Dumba.
I swear to God, if he signs with Chicago, I said it before on the show, like, my fantasy hockey team name has been the Dumba 55s since they first announced that was going to be Dumba's number. And he's since had to change it. He changed it to 24.
As you mentioned.
But I've kept that team name. I will ditch that team name if he goes to Chicago.
That's fine. You can go ahead and find yourself a new fantasy name, my guy. As you said, if you tuned into last week's Blackhawks preview show, I mentioned that there is a certain specific position they are still looking for in free agency, and that is a right-handed shot defenseman. What does Matt Dumba happen to be?
There hasn't been a lot of steam on that one.
There hasn't been a lot of steam on him going anywhere.
Any signing there.
Yeah.
I think part of it was, and I hate that I have to even bring him up during the show today, but seeing where Tony DeAngelo was going to fall, because if you're looking for
that showed.
If you're looking for an offensive defenseman to bring into your team, with all respect to Matt Dumba, Tony DeAngelo does bring a little more offensive punch than what sorry, no pun intended there. But he does bring a little bit more offensive punch than what Matt Dumba can bring. That said, Dumba is better in the defensive zone than Tony DeAngelo, as are most defensemen in the NHL. So I guess we could see that. But with DeAngelo signing today, 1 year, $1.6 million in Carolina. Another nice.
I didn't even see that.
Yeah, an interesting little nugget there. Why might 1.6 be significant to Tony DeAngelo? If you think about the number one as January.
Oh,
there it is, the light bulb moment.
Whoa, okay.
Yep, took a minute, but we'll blame it on the whiskey.
No.
We'll blame it on being on a Monday instead of a Tuesday.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't even realize it was Monday.
Yeah, but here we are. So those are kind of just to recap the bigger moves so far on the Wild's offseason. Overall, I liked but didn't necessarily love the Wild's draft As we talked about on our draft recap show, I do think they kind of left some talent on the table with their first round pick, but also getting someone in the second round who was projected as a first round pick. If you switch the order on those two picks, you're probably looking at it like it's a home run draft. So on the whole, looking forward to that and seeing how an already top 5 prospect pool continues to develop. Let Judd Brackett cook.
Hey, it's okay. You almost had a home run in the first round. You were just two selections away from a home run in the first round. Is all.
Why do I let you talk on this show? Why?
Because you'll be talking just like I talked a good 65 to 70% of the Blackhawks preview show. You'll talk 65 to 70% of this preview show until I get my little jabs in.
Why are you the way that you are?
Because you're about to go on a nice solid 10-day vacation or 8-day vacation in Europe. So I'm gonna, hey, gotta bust the balls a little bit.
If you say so. The biggest story I think at this point for the Wild's offseason is that they have 2 restricted free agents that need to be re-signed. One of which is Kalen Addison, who is not arbitration eligible, but still needs to be re-signed.
And do not confuse him with Jordan Addison, who was just pulled over for going like 100-something miles per hour down.
Yeah, 140 and a 55. That'll get you pulled over.
It's not that bad.
Yeah, at least he was the first to report to training camp.
Also, to be fair, he was trying to get home to his dog, who apparently had a medical issue. Quite frankly, I'm on his side. I'm on his side for that one. If
his dog really did have a problem, I don't blame him for. But also, like, you can't be going 140. Like, come on, my guy.
But it was at like 2 a.m. Barely anyone's out anyway.
3 a.m. But also, like, you're dealing with drunk idiots out driving at that hour. So there's that. Plus, where he was at too, like, he was coming up on a curve that, I mean, he would have been road pizza in no time. But we're going to talk hockey and not Minnesota. We could do a half-hour show on the speeding violations of Minnesota Vikings wide receivers. We really could.
Hey, maybe one day we will cover the NFL. We'll look down the road at some point.
But the big one for the Wild right now is Filip Gustavsson and what is to come with his new contract. He will either get 1 or 2 years on his next deal. If he gets 2 years, that will take him right up to his UFA eligibility, 25 right now. So he probably, I would think both sides, just from a stability standpoint, would prefer a 2-year deal, but 1-year deal still very much on the table. And Joel, I think a really good comparable is Ilya Samsonov, who just got 1 year, $3.55 million in arbitration for Toronto.
Yep.
How would you compare those two, Gustavsson and Samsonov? And do you think that both sides will come together before that August 4th arbitration date?
Well, believe it or not, August 4th is fast approaching.
It really is, but it's also after the honeymoon. So
that's true.
If I get off the plane and there's news about a Gus Bus signing, I'm good with that.
I mean, if it's anything like, as you know, I was just waiting on an arbitration settlement to get figured out. And we thought it was only going to take maybe same day, and it took 3 days. So, I mean, I'm sure you got some time. But, I mean, if I'm comparing the two, and like if you're asking me which one I would rather have, and what was Samsonov's number again? 1 year, 3.55.
3.55.
Oh, 3.5, 3.55. Okay. I mean, you actually might be surprised by this, but I think of the two, I would prefer to have Gustavsson. I might be basing it off of recency. I mean, look, you got ousted in the first round, but by very little fault of his. And he looked damn good. He looked damn good powering your way into the playoffs, into the playoff or the postseason in the first place. I don't know how much I can attribute Samsonov's kind of up and down to what horribly defensive team that he's on. Toronto,
yeah, there's that. But
I get it, but I don't know. I think I would rather have Gustavsson, and therefore, like, I mean, are there any reports on how many years that the Wild are trying to seek versus what he wants? Or is this more of an actual dollar amount issue?
I am thinking that it's going to be the getting to that second year, so that presumably the tandem for this year would be Gustavsson as your 1, Marc-Andre Fleury as your 2. Then next season you go into it with Gustavsson as your 1 and Jesper Wallstedt as your 2.
We'll get into him.
And then
we will
you
get
can
into
figure
him.
out after that what the tandem is going to be. I wouldn't blame Gus if he walked after 2 years, especially if he has 2 very productive years, knowing that he probably would get a pretty nice bump in free agency after those 2 years.
He would.
Especially if the Wild's future is going to be Jesper Wallstedt, and hint, it is going to be Jesper Wallstedt.
Yeah, that's going to be a good portion of this show, probably talking mostly about him. But
it could be.
Look, I mean, last season, dude, his regular season, he posted a pretty damn solid 931 save percentage.
Mm-hmm. 210 goals against average, too.
210 goals against. Yeah, that's fantastic. I think that was good enough for. I'm not looking at it right now. I'm pretty sure I remember that was good enough for 3rd or 4th best in the league.
I think save percentage was 3rd, and goals against was also top 5.
Yes. So, and he finished in top. Didn't he finish top 3 in Vezina voting?
No, he was not a finalist, but he was near the top, but he was not a finalist.
Why did you turn that trying to show that? No, Sam, I am not.
That's a call out right there.
I am not. For one, I am not a traitor. We've been over this. They are my second team, as Dan's second team is the Islanders, which is a little odd. I have a connection to Vegas. You don't really necessarily have a connection to New York.
I do. My dad used to live on Long Island for a little bit.
Did he? Okay, well, yeah. I forgot about that. All right, never mind then. All right, well, that argument just went out the window. All right, never mind.
That's why we ended
up. And the show.
Dad was an Islanders fan.
And the show. It's over.
Football on it.
No, I actually don't really know why I flipped. I usually wear hats backwards.
Got the King.
All right, you know what? Fine. There, because you asked, I will flip it back this way.
There you go. Show off the defending champ logo.
Defending champs. Hey, second team. It's fine. Also, the other. I mean, I have a personal connection to Vegas, but also the Wolves had a cup of coffee as being Vegas's team. So
that's true.
Chicago Wolves. Sam should know this. Of all people,
she does. She does. Goaltender Alex Lyon.
Exactly. No, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would be willing to give him the extra year, so that 2, and then I don't know. I mean, yeah, I know you guys can't really spare. Thank you, much better. Don't make me call you out again. All right, fair. Lyon is the GOAT. Yeah, Lyon will be replacing Sergei Bobrovsky.
I wonder how many.
I don't actually know.
How many birds for Alex Lyon on his new deal?
What?
Yeah, okay.
That's
after he won the
that went over my backwards to then forwards hat. That just went straight.
Yeah, after he won the Calder Cup with the Wolves, gave a double bird during the team celebration.
Oh, that's what you meant by birds.
Yeah.
I thought you meant literally the animal.
Well, yes. That's the joke. That's how you be subtle about it.
I do remember that, and I loved him for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, what's it? With his performance, and look, as much as I love Flower, he's not getting any younger. This is probably every year we say he's playing, we're probably sitting here going, is this it? Is this the final year? And we've probably been doing that for the last now arguably 3 seasons, at least 2 seasons. Part of me thought he was just doing a swan song with us when he was with us. But he's not getting any younger. You have, and again, this is so much teasing of Jesper Wallstedt, like you have a potential goalie prodigy waiting in the wings. So quite frankly, if I were you, I wouldn't really give 2 shits of who's starting in the next year or 2, because he will be here and he will probably take that spot for the next decade plus.
Yeah, I do think Volstead needs one more year at Iowa just to really
That's fine.
settle into the North American game, which totally okay with. I do not want him to be
We're doing
heading
a
into
wild.
next year.
We're doing a wild show too. Shout out Iowa Wild. Those games specifically are very fun. I've been to a couple. I had a friend that worked in ticket sales there, so I'd go and visit. We went to a couple games, got me some tickets. It is a great barn they got over there. It's fun.
It is, and the rivalry with the Rockford Ice Hogs.
Rockford Ice Hogs, yes. I'm not even referencing that. I've been to more Iowa Wild games than I have Rockford Ice Hog games. So
that and the when the Admirals get in the mix, it just between those three, just the triangle of hate between those three is really something.
It's something you love to see. I don't know. I'd give Gustavsson. Samsonov got 3.55 for 1 year. I'd give Gustavsson 2x4.
That would be.
Here's the thing, though. I would do that, but you guys can't spare a square. You can maybe give them the $5 that are in your pocket right now, and that's pretty much all you can afford.
Yeah, here's the thing with arbitration is it does not take into account whatever the team's cap situation is. It just says very raw, very blunt. Here is the number. This is what it is.
Yeah.
And Minnesota, you'll have to figure out how to make that deal fit under your cap. Gustavsson, that is your contract for next year. It get to that point?
What is remind me, and I guess remind the casuals watching or listening in the future from where I'm saying this right now. What's the alternative? And it usually doesn't ever happen. But when
it's get a deal done.
Because is there like a penalty if like the Wild were simply like, no, we're not going to do that? Well, that's been
finalized. Once it goes to an independent arbiter, whatever the deal is decided after that, that is it. It is set in stone. That is what the contract is. Neither side is allowed to budge from that number. It is exactly that. So
what's the very rare alternative that happens in that scenario? Would it just be we absolutely do not want to do this?
At that point, he's locked in at that price, and the Wild would be in a position where they would go, okay, then we're going to trade you. That's really what it would come down to if they were really going to be like,
not what's going to happen.
Pay that number. I would be stunned if that happened.
That would only happen if both sides were just absolutely I hate you too, but we need to do this, and that's not the case.
And here's why I'm hoping that sort of deal comes together before arbitration is because once it gets to that point, the negotiation conversations change, and it becomes the very real and raw. This is what we've seen from you. This is the things that we think are knocks on you as a player. It can lead to some toxic situations sometimes. It also tends to result in not getting a longer-term deal done after that, usually the player walking in free agency. So given that Brandon Duhaime had filed for arbitration but was able to get a deal done with the Wild ahead of his arbitration date, my hope is that Gustavsson would be able to come in probably somewhere similar. I think that 3.5 to 3.75 range is probably where that number is ultimately going to end up. If it does get as high as 4, I would be a little surprised by that, but that does still give them a little bit of room to re-sign Addison, probably on a 1 or 2 year deal there. I would think the Wild are probably looking 2 years on an Addison extension, might only end up giving him the 1 just to see, but really give him more opportunities this year. He was kind of sitting in the press box quite a bit last season, and despite being your power play quarterback, didn't really see a lot of power play time and didn't see a lot of ice time, frankly, in the back half of the season. So my hope and prayer is that they are able to get a deal done. I do think they will.
I think they will.
But I 2 years at 3.75, I could be comfortable with that.
That's fine. And like you said, like I alluded to, if he ends up walking after those 2 years, you don't really need him anyway. So who cares?
Looking from the net out.
Oh, also wait.
Put
put this up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, any normal human being would be sick to be a Red Wings fan.
Apologies to Phil if you're watching and listening.
Blackhawks fan, man. It's in my blood to hate them.
Joel, looking ahead to next year, and we're going to get into the projected lines here a little bit later in the show.
Yeah.
But I want to know where you see, just as an outsider looking in, what are your expectations for Marco Rossi next season? And where do you think he ultimately settles in with this Wild lineup?
I mean, I really thought he was going to shine as early as this year, and yet he was he played, 19 games up with you guys last year?
Yep.
Go ahead.
He started the season in Minnesota, was mostly relegated to fourth line minutes, which should not be his role. He was kind of counted on to be the goal scorer on his line, which also is not his role.
Right.
And then was sent down to Iowa, where he was one of the more productive forwards with the Iowa Wild last year. It was kind of him and Sammy Walker were kind of the leaders of the pack. Nick Patan in there as well, but really counted on a lot with Iowa last year.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I not knowing too much, just knowing like where you drafted him, and he is your what? I mean, he's on a lot of lists I've looked at, especially mostly the Athletics list of Wild prospects. He is your pretty much consensus number 2 overall prospect.
Right.
I mean,
depending what you consider for prospect as well, because
he counts. It's just like Bedard technically counts too.
Right. I do think he does technically count as a prospect, only because, like, for example, Matt Boldy, he has his spot in the lineup and he has his long-term deal.
Yeah.
He's played enough games to qualify. He's no longer a prospect.
Rossi,
it's a little closer, but
yeah. Matt Boldy is disgusting. That kid is
so good.
Fantastic. Which that was kind of like my switch. I thought it was going to be reversed, to be honest with you. I actually thought it was going to be. Is it Rossi or is it Rossi?
Rossi. It is Rossi.
It's Rossi.
He's confirmed that.
I thought that was going to be split because I remember you having high. I remember the hype around Boldy coming up too, but it was like a dual threat with the two of them, and I thought it was kind of going to be like a battle, and they were going to, each kind of put up twin 50-point seasons. What did Boldy finish with this year?
That's a great question. Matt Boldy this last season was, once the page loads here, I had these numbers up. 63 last season.
Yeah, so
31 goals, 32 assists.
Wow, that is ridiculously consistent.
Yeah. So for a guy who turned 22 during the season, those are some really good looking numbers.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll dial it back a little. Like for one, I'll go off last season. I did expect Rossi to be with you guys the whole year. Mm-hmm. I know he had the slow start. That's not his fault. He was tossed on the fourth line. Like, I've seen him before. I would have expected him to put up maybe Ryan Hartman numbers. He get, like a 37 points, 15, 20.
Right. Well, that also depends which Ryan Hartman numbers are you looking at? Are you looking at the Ryan Hartman numbers from 2 seasons ago?
No.
Or are you looking at the Ryan Hartman numbers from last season? Last season was not nearly the same Ryan Hartman. Going from 65 points down to 37, it's a pretty sizable jump.
I agree. That's bound to happen. But I would have expected that. I'm expecting – am I wrong in thinking that Rossi could break out this year? And by breakout, I mean Boldy's got 63 points. That's pretty good. I would say breakout as in if he's put on the right line, if he's put in top 6, so probably consistently on the second line. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't see any reason why, and maybe put him on, maybe give him some power play time. Not to mention, if you pair him up with Kaprizov at any point, he's going to score some points.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I could see him putting up 50 points next year.
I would be very happy with 50 points out of Marco Rossi next season. I think that's attainable. I think I would even be happy with if he, got in the 45-ish range. Maybe looking 12 to 15 goals and 30 to whatever assists to get that number up. It would be a big surprise to see him have like a 60-plus point outburst, just from where he was at in the AHL last year to making that jump to should be full-time NHLer this season. That is a really big jump to make. And for Rossi, who missed an entire season with myocarditis, and had to not only make the switch from the European game to the North American game, but also doing that after taking a year off.
Yep.
That is a very, very difficult year to lose and a very difficult time to be losing that year as well. His draft plus 1 year. So really where you have a lot of growth as a prospect. That was a big, big change. So it stunted where he's at. I think it's far more fair, and shout out to Brett Marshall with Sound the Foghorn for bringing this point up. It's almost more fair at this point to kind of compare him to 2021 draft picks in the top 10 versus the 2020
absolutely.
in the top.
No, I got you. Absolutely. But you don't, when you lose a year, especially to something like that serious, you are now theoretically into the draft plus 1 year class at this point.
Right.
There's no doubt about that in my mind. That's why, like, I mean, with how highly touted he is, and now he's had the full, like he had last season, he got to go do pretty well in Iowa, get his confidence up after being up with the Wild for 19 games. Only had 1 assist, so obviously needed the confidence booster. Like, I mean, yeah, that's kind of where I'm with you. Like, anywhere in that 40 to 60 range 60 would be insane. That'd be pretty damn good, I'd say. But I mean, the top 10 pick like that, like he was, right? Like it's not exactly unattainable if I'm being optimistic about it.
Looking at next season, let's. Do you want to do projected lines first or projected finish first? We can go either way on this one.
Well, we haven't even talked about your boy.
Which one? They're all my boys.
The number 1 goaltending prospect of all goaltending prospects right now.
Yeah, we did a little bit. We talked about.
How are we going to have a Wild preview show without talking about that monster?
Well, okay, let's get into Wallstedt here a little bit.
One of the very few Wild players where I'm like, I know a little bit about this kid.
Okay, so let's go with I guess it's kind of a little more looking at Iowa Wild versus Minnesota Wild for next season. Let's do it this way. Over or under, we'll have 4.5 NHL games for Wallstedt next season. If they call him up for a short period of time, heaven forbid something happens with Fleury or Gus.
If they're smart, I would say under. He's only 20 years old. And yeah, he's a goaltending prospect prodigy, but you still don't want to rush. You don't want to rush that. And goaltenders like defensemen take a little longer to really adjust their game. So I don't know. I would, unless he is just lighting up the AHL and, he's a top 2 goaltender in the entire league, not just the division, not just the conference down there. Like, and it just to the point where you look down there and you're like, okay, this is not helping him down there. He's just killing these kids. He's just killing all these teams. Like, that would be the only way I could see the overhitting. I think if they're smart, they just leave him down in Iowa all year. Maybe, like you said, if God forbid anything happens to Fleury, or if something with Gustavsson, whatever it is, like, then I could see the overhitting, and maybe they want to bring him up. And if they're operating the same way that I know, like, the Hawks brass are operating, where they're not worried about burning a year of the the entry level contract, then in that case, maybe an over could make sense. But I don't see it. Him being only 20 years old, I don't think it'd be smart to bring him up for that much. Maybe 1 or 2 games. And again, it's all going to depend on how he's actually doing down there in Iowa.
Yeah, that's true too. And another important point to consider is the Wild are trying to set up their organization in such a way that there is a consistent development path from whether that is juniors, whether that's playing in Russia, whether that's playing in Europe, 1 year, maybe 2 in Iowa, consistent winning culture in Iowa brings that up to the NHL level, and you have that compete level top to bottom throughout your organization.
Yeah.
Guerin has already seemed to be pretty heavily investing in the Iowa Wild. So if you are wanting Iowa to be a place where your prospects are capable of developing and developing well, you need to put Iowa in a position to be successful as well. And I think if you are counting on Iowa to be successful next season, especially knowing that, 2 years from now, that's probably where Marat Huznadinov is going to play. That's probably where Liam Ugrin is going to play. That's probably where Danila Yurov is going to be playing.
Yep.
You need to have Iowa ready so that when those guys are coming through the ranks 2 seasons from now, you've got a culture of winning established there. And bringing up Wallstead too early, to me, that's a sign that you aren't as confident with Iowa, barring it being worst case scenario where something does happen to Gustafsson or Fleury.
Exactly. Like there's something to be said for helping out the farm club too, especially if they're making a playoff push. Also, not even just about Wallstead. I didn't even realize, at least from the for as far as the Athletic is concerned, you were the only team in the league with a top prospect at all 6 positions. You have a top prospect.
Yes, that is also a fair point.
Yeah, goal, center, wing, or both wings and both D spots. You have it's pretty good. And also, yeah, you were right. The Wild actually had just as many in the top 50 prospects as we did.
That's true. And having Wallstedt as the number 1 goaltending prospect per Scott Wheeler, I mean, I still can't believe
where was he in the actual just player list? Regardless,
he was. So they did the 50 skaters.
Oh, they excluded
on one.
Goalies.
They did the 10 goalies on the other for a separate article.
And I knew about the separate article because Wallstedt was first.
Mm-hmm. I haven't seen like an overall list that included both skaters and goalies, just because it's harder to measure.
I thought he might have done or was planning on doing a full on list, but no. I mean, I know Wallstedt rounded out that list. He was the first one. I know what's his name in oh my god, number 2 is I think is he a Montreal prospect? I can't remember his name right now. You should know. You love goalies. You should know this off the top of your head.
Wait, are you talking about
the top 10 goalie prospects that Scott Wheeler released?
Oh, number 2 is Dustin Wolf with Calgary.
Maybe I'm thinking number 3 then.
3 would have been Yaroslav Askarov.
That's it.
Yep.
That's it.
Askarov was the guy I was hoping the Wild would draft, and then they waited 1 more year, and then they ended up getting Wallstedt anyway. So I'm not going to complain, but dude, Askarov's the real deal too. That guy's going to be such a stud.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know if you've seen this one. I don't know how much AHL hockey you got to watch last year. But after a shutout, he will tip the net down like he's closing the net at the end of the game when the clock hits 0. After
Wallstedt or Askarov?
Askarov did that.
Oh, okay.
And then also he had one where after a shootout win, he started doing bench press with the goal.
That I saw. I saw that. That was awesome.
Goaltenders with personality. We love it. But that type of personality, not like Jordan Binnington personality. Two totally different extremes.
That's not a personality. If that's a personality, we call that, what did I call it last week? That's full diaper personality.
Yeah, that's a really solid way to describe it.
That's me being nice and not swearing. But I mean, dude, would I be all right? I knew I was planning on doing this to you with the Wallstedt thing when we got to him. Mm-hmm. Take the Dan Bradley Minnesota Wild or Minnesota sports fan. Put that persona aside.
Okay.
because I know how doom and gloom you guys can be.
That's true.
Put that persona to
we know
bed
misery better than most fan bases. Not all, but most.
Put that persona aside for a second. Am I too, what's the word? Am I too hot takey here? Am I not hot taken? Or is it too hot of a take, or is it just right? Or is it not enough by saying that Wallstedt is projecting, just based on things I've read? I've watched a tiny amount of highlights and stuff, projecting to be kind of like the hype of an Igor Shesterkin.
That isn't, I would say that's not too much hype for him to be at that type of level.
Am I just right? Is that too hot of a take?
I think you're about right, because during his draft year, there was a lot of talk about him being a potential top 10, if not top 5 pick during his draft year, which, to see a goaltender go top 5, it doesn't happen very often. In fact, I would have to look this up to be sure, but I believe the last goaltender to go in the top 5 was Carey Price. So if that is the type of ceiling that Wallstedt has, the Wild are going to be in pretty good shape. That said, he was not the first goaltender off the board in his draft year. In fact, Sebastian Cossa, late rising prospect there, had a really solid draft year. He ended up going to Detroit a couple of picks before Wallstedt went off the board, and the Wild just happened to be in a position where they could trade with the Edmonton Oilers, by the way, what is their biggest organizational need?
Goaltender.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. What does Edmonton need? Defense and goaltending, starting with goaltending.
Goaltending.
Yeah. So how in the world it worked out that Wallstedt fell to the Wild, I may never know. But shout out to Judd Brackett and Bill Canadian for sprinting to the podium to get him.
Canadian teams don't make smart decisions. I mean,
that's probably fair. I mean, when was the last time a Canadian team won the Cup? U.S. teams got to be doing something, right?
When was the last time a Canadian team won the Cup? Was it
95?
95? Yeah. Okay. I was going to say 94. I was close.
It's been a hot minute. Looking ahead to next year, the Minnesota Wild will finish where in the Central Division?
Yeah. I was actually just listening to a podcast last week. I think it was last week. Yeah, it was last week. One of my new favorite podcasts. It's a Blackhawks podcast, but they were doing like a full-on Central Division, like, where will each of these teams finish? And I think before I even say exactly where, the Wild are one of the 3 teams in the Central that are pretty much consensus top 3.
Yeah, I think we've kind of all figured out that, like, at least headed into next year, Colorado and Dallas, whichever order you want to put them in, those are probably your top 2 heading into next year.
That's your 1-2 unless Dallas underachieves and unless you guys overachieve. So, but that's the thing. Like, there is no teasing there. I mean, your top 3 in the Central, for all intents and purposes, is Colorado, Dallas, and Minnesota. So you can. Well, okay. I didn't ask you to take away your persona can come back now.
Okay.
You can pretty much rest easy, at least from an outsider perspective. You can probably rest easy that you guys are going to finish in that top 3. But I don't know. Knowing you guys, you're going to sit there and think you might finish last in the league. Who knows? But
yeah, we won't finish last in the league.
I don't know, man.
Especially not.
I've heard your doom and gloom takes, man.
Barring us, having just the absolute worst, like Columbus Blue Jackets tier injury luck this season.
They tanked
because
I am convinced they actually legitimately tanked.
And the number of man games they lost last year did not have a single 82-game skater.
That's true.
Only had 5 guys play like 70 or more games. They were just beyond battered by the end of last season. It would take the Wild having that just putrid of injury luck to get to that point.
Not even, though. You still have enough. enough.
Right, and there should be enough firepower to keep us out of a top 5 pick, even in that worst five, or like that worst case scenario.
So I normally don't like to do chalk, but I am going to go chalk. I think you guys finished third. It's chalk.
Okay, let me back up and I should have framed this a different way, because I think we kind of did this last week with Chicago, but we didn't outright label it this way. What is your, let's go floor and ceiling? For where the Wild potentially could finish. So give a range. So your prediction is like that they will finish third. What is a legitimate range where you could see the Wild finishing, depending on what happens?
You're gonna love this. You might glow a little bit here if your persona will allow you to. But I think their floor cannot be any lower than fifth. And honestly, that's probably way too liberal of a choice. I don't think you guys could finish fifth. If you finished fifth, shit has gone south in Minnesota and things need to change.
Well, and keep in mind as well that they're also playing with nearly $15 million in dead cap.
I understand that, but the skill you have on your roster, whether you underachieved last year or not, I would definitely say you did underachieve last year. I remember I was picking you guys to potentially somehow find your way into the conference final really early in the season, if I remember correctly.
Right, but we had some big slumps from guys like Ryan Hartman, guys like Marcus Foligno, had to ship off Jordan Greenway because of where he was at. The grief line just completely fell apart.
I look up, you have one of the you have arguably some of the best chemistry for sure. Like it's Zuccarello and Kaprizov, right? Those two are basically bonded at the hip.
Yep.
Boldy
kids call him Uncle Kirill.
Exactly. So he's not slowing down anytime soon. Kaprizov he's a superstar in this league. That's not not a problem. Boldy has shown he's going to be one of your top stars moving forward. Hartman is your sandpaper.
Pat Maroon is also the sandpaper.
Pat Maroon is big. Pat Maroon is sorry, hold on. Hartman is your sandpaper that can also score. Maroon is mostly going to be your sandpaper, just at his age at this point.
Well, and then you throw in Dewar and Duhane, Dewey 1 and Dewey 2. That's kind of going to be their type of role as well.
Exactly.
That is going to be a frustrating bottom six to play against.
You know what? We didn't talk about this because I didn't get to give you more flowers on another kid that I fast fell in love with by watching a very, very small amount of college hockey and a little bit of, he was in the World Juniors, I think, right? Brock Faber.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I fell in love with him real quick. He became all of a sudden an overnight prodigy at the defensive position. My question to that though is he's committed to University of Minnesota, right?
He was, and once the Wild called him up last year, he's not going back.
He's coming. Okay, so he's staying. So there you go. Now you got Brock Faber in his full-on rookie year this year. I would maybe even argue he could potentially try to find himself in the Calder conversation as a defenseman. At least maybe not winning the Calder. We know he's probably going to do that. But at least...
Yeah, Adam Fantilli, the number one center prospect.
How high? What are you drinking in that water glass?
It's just water, my friend.
Are you sure about that? It's not vodka? Oh, wait a minute. Hold on a second. We got
a couple comments from Mateo here.
We do. We got to let him in here.
I'm roughly agreeing with this one where he says floor is sixth and ceiling is second.
I don't know if floor is sixth, man. That's rough if you guys.
I do think it's a higher floor than that, if only because of Arizona isn't going to be very good. Chicago isn't going to be very good. Mm-hmm. We talked last week about how putrid Nashville's forward group is.
Yeah, Mateo's on my side here. Faber's got a sneaky offensive game too, so that's why I'm saying he could sneak. He could squeak his way into the best rookie defenseman conversation next year.
Right. And if, for example, like going back to Kalen Addison should be given the opportunity to be power play 1 next season.
Yep.
that probably means that you're moving Jared Spurgeon to power play 2, or you're playing with those 2 D-men on power play 1, at which point you might consider going Faber on power play 2. I see a scenario where he should get some. I don't know if it will be he's really locked in on that second unit. And yeah, Mateo's saying, 6 is like Boldy and Kaprizov go down, season-ending injuries. Yeah, I guess in that case, but I think even there, Nashville's going to be bad next year.
Nashville is not.
I think I'm going to go floor is 5.
Oh, you're going your pick first,
2.
all right. So floor is 5, ceiling is 2 for you. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think I'm going to go 3rd for their division finish as well.
Well, we agree.
Yeah, I think so. But like we talked about last week, St. Louis could finish anywhere between 3rd and 7th, and it really wouldn't surprise me much.
Closer to 7th.
Anywhere in there. If they're anywhere outside of those spots, I'll be stunned.
Yeah.
I think they're going to be mid.
I mean, I just look at I'm not sitting here saying you got all these crazy all-star names, but solid defense as long as everyone stays healthy. You got Flower, you got Gustavsson at whatever arbitration is going to give him, or if it even goes to arbitration. So that's a damn solid 1 and 2. Boldy's going to take another step. I think I can see him cracking 70 points next year. Yeah, you lose Reaves. You basically, like you said, you replaced Sandpaper with more Sandpaper and Pat Maroon. It doesn't matter. You're gonna glow, and I think so is Matt, and so is anyone else that's a Wild fan watching. Floor for me is 5. I know I've been talking down that whole 5 slot thing. But floor is 5 just because, like you said, if there's injuries, if everyone underperforms, if the rookies that are coming up this year don't show out or need way more time than we think, things got to go wrong. I could see 5. And that's also going to depend on what the hell is Winnipeg going to do next year? Like we said, St. Louis.
Yeah, Winnipeg
St.
could
Louis
blow
is
it
kind
all
of a
up.
wild card. Yeah, exactly. So.
Yeah, Wheeler gone, Dubois gone, Scheifele 1 leg out the door.
Exactly. So
Hellebuck in the same boat.
That's why even me saying 5 as your floor is a little, just the way it's projecting right now, it sounds off to me. But I'll be liberal in that choice and go 5 your floor. I honestly think your ceiling could be 1.
Wow.
One of these, you
have a hard time seeing that just because of where Dallas, I think, is going to be next season.
Shut the persona off again, though.
Yep.
Shut the persona off again.
Yep.
Here, for no other reason other than you guys continue to be not mid. You're definitely above mid, but you continue to have this. There is this aura, there is this love of look, they're building, you got your superstar in Kaprizov. Now you have a number 2 for him in Boldy. Rossi could potentially show up next year and get back on track and maybe break out a little bit, just a little bit. I'm not saying next year is your year, you're making the conference finals. I'm sorry, even if you do finish 1, I don't think you get past the second round. Maybe you get past the first round. I don't think you get past the second round. But we're not talking playoffs. We're just talking season. I would say 1 would happen if Colorado, again, their injuries catch up. If injuries catch up to them, they're going to be missing
Landeskog.
Thank you.
Yep, he's out the whole year. And
they're missing Landeskog again. If they get hurt, if they get hurt, banged up again, whatever. If Dallas underachieves, they're young, but they got some old core there too. So that old core needs to continue producing with how they're producing.
Yeah, eventually the cliff is coming for Pavelski. It's coming for Ben.
No, the cliff is pretty much there for Ben. If the playoffs are any indication,
oh yeah,
if Ben would have not hit his cliff this playoffs, we might be.
Dallas wins the cup if Ben plays to the level we've seen.
I think so.
That's why I picked them, is because I thought Ben was going to show up.
I'll still argue, like, Vegas showed it. They were the deepest team. They were the most skilled team up and down, all four lines, all three D pairings, goaltending. But still, like, if Ben isn't just a shell of his former self the entire playoffs, we might be talking about at the very least, a different Stanley Cup final. Not necessarily Dallas winning, but a different final. But anyway.
And not to mention Ben getting himself thrown out 2 minutes into
that's the part of the
game
too.
And picking up a suspension. Like,
exactly. So I say one only because between the three teams that are the consensus top three in the Central, without going too deep into it, you could really just flip a coin and any one of you three can take the 1 seed. It's just going to take a lot and it's going to be a battle. Like this year we saw Colorado still, crazy enough with all their injuries, still took the 1 seed in the Central, but only by 1 point. And then Dallas was, 5 points ahead of you. That's still 6 points splitting up between first and third. Like, that's close. I think it could be even closer.
If the Wild are able to win the division with 15 mil in dead cap, that should scare everybody for what is to come, knowing that there's a top 5 prospect pool on the way, knowing there is a top goaltending prospect on the way. That should scare a lot of people.
Believe it or not, because I've already thrown in a couple shots this show. I won't throw. This isn't a shot. This is a legitimate remind me. When are those contracts gone?
So these next 2 years, it will be 14.7 mil dead cap from the Parise Suter buyout.
The next 2 years still?
The next 2 years.
I was thinking it was this year was the last year of it.
Oh no. Last year it was 12.7. These next 2 years will be 14.7, which, by the way, is still cheaper than what you would be paying if Parise and Suter were still here. Also, if Parise and Suter are still here, you don't see Brock Faber come up last season.
If Parise and Suter are still here, you're not this super juggernaut team, or not super juggernaut. Sorry, you're not this sleeper up and coming team that you are slated, that you have been for the past couple of years. Because I'm sorry, both of them are not getting any younger. Wilds fan. Oh, here we go, Mateo. Wild fans want to be so miserable going into likely the worst season financially for the next decade, and we are still a consensus top. But that's kind of my point. Your dead cap is you're bleeding money, and yet you're still a consensus top 3 team now. Yes, obviously part of that is due in part to just the Central Division being packed with rebuilds right now, but still. There's only really 2 teams in the Central that have come out and said, we are rebuilding. And yes, one of those teams got a expedited rebuild with some luck. But outside of that, all the other teams don't have a direction. That's the other thing, too. You're dead cap. You have dead cap, and I get it. It looks to me, at least if shit pans out, you still have a direction. Wallstedt is in the wings. Rossi, if this year still isn't enough, he's in the wings. What's that other Danila
Yurov.
Danila Yurov. I know that guy is another big name. Brock Faber's going to be up this year, but let's say it's not necessarily time yet, and he plays. Can he play in Iowa? Is that rule?
He would go to Iowa. Yep,
like a Kevin Korchinski bullshit rule.
Similar.
But he's old enough to play in Iowa.
Yeah, he would go to Iowa if he, heaven forbid, isn't up to par with the Wild this year.
Right. And this is rookie year, it happens. But even with all of that, you have all that waiting in the wings.
and that's before you start getting into Carson Lambos and Ryan O'Rourke. You start looking at the other D prospects coming through. The Wild have a really good framework of prospects from the net out.
Yurov and Ogren. Ogren was the other name I knew.
Yeah, Liam Ogren. Yeah.
Ogren. Watch out, they will be still right. You what I'm seeing is you've done some pretty good drafting, and even if you were underwhelmed by your draft pick this year,
our Lord and Savior Judd Brackett, I still trust that man. I would run through a brick wall for that man.
Dude, I mean, I'm even a big fan of Bill Guerin. I mean, we met him. We met him in person. He's a cool dude.
Yeah,
he's a really cool guy.
Nobody doesn't like Billy G.
Yeah. If nothing else, two of the coolest and funnest GMs are in the Central Division.
Yeah, the only person who doesn't like Billy Guerin is whoever is paying his bar tab at Tootsie's.
Who the hell's he's Bill Guerin. Why isn't he paying his own damn tab?
He is probably picking up the tab, but if for whatever reason he's not,
we should have had him pick up our tab when we met him.
It wasn't gonna happen, but still would have been cool.
Yeah, no, dude. I'm gonna say floor is one because those three teams can just
ceiling is one.
Or, I'm sorry, ceiling.
Ceiling is one. That would be incredible.
Well, floor is one.
That's 3-4 years from now.
Yeah. I don't even think there is a team where their floor is one.
Next season?
Floor?
Yeah.
Floor is one hasn't happened since. I actually don't even know.
I can't think of a team.
Tampa,
maybe 2 years ago, Colorado, that team that won the cup. To win the division.
Oh, to win the division, yes. I mean, like league.
Yeah, or even there, it's rare to ever have a team that consensus number one at the start of the season goes through the whole year as number one and wins the cup. That's rare. And even there, Hawks weren't a consensus number one really going into it.
In 2013? No, yeah, I guess you're
right. 13, yeah. 15.
No, 13.
Because 13 was coming out of the lockout, and everybody was like, yeah, the Hawks have been together. This is their same core. There's already all this other changing that's going on, and Chicago has basically
our good buddy Joey popping in late to the party, but outside of a cup win, what's a victory of a season for the Wild? Feel like lots of disappointment, or maybe I just follow 3 Wild fans.
That's a good question.
That's the persona I'm talking about. So Joey's not wrong, but I like the question. What is?
No, it is because
victory?
The Wild have so frequently struggled to get out of the first round in the playoffs, and they'll run into a year where Jake Ottinger stands on his head, or Jake Allen stands on. Avoid goaltenders named Jake in the playoffs. That is our new rule for the Wild. Avoid goaltenders named Jake. I think it is a successful season if they get out of the first round. And I know that's not a particularly high bar to clear. But given what the franchise has done over the last few years, that to me is still an important step forward. I get it. There's the 15 mil-ish of dead cap. I get it. You're going to be playing a lot of younger guys this year. To me, that is your win. It is also if you see the consistent growth from Marco Rossi. I think if he can establish himself as a top 6 forward,
we've talked about
that's a win.
So I get it.
If Brock Faber establishes himself as a top 4D, that is a win. If Gustavsson and Fleury are healthy the entire season, that's probably going to lead to this year being a win. Mateo saying Charlie Stramel will be a menace to society now that Wisconsin won't be a nightmare of a college organization. Yeah, and I feel bad for Granado with Wisconsin last year, but they just got Mankato's coach going to Wisconsin now, so
I completely forgot about even mentioning Charlie Stramel waiting in the wings. Unless, I mean, he's probably got what 2-3 seasons.
Two at least. Next season with Wisconsin, maybe even one more with Wisconsin, just as the Badgers are rebuilding.
Give him some time.
Big Ten hockey is going to be stupid the next couple of years. It's going to be so good.
Yeah.
Let's get into these projected lines so that we can kind of put a wrap on things here.
You spend most of the time on this. I can give you a projection, but this is mostly you.
Yeah, this is kind of what I would like to see and what I envision is probably there. If this is what the lines look like for most of the year, going to make a lot of sense. Kaprizov, Eriksson, Zuccarello. I really like that as a top line. I think Eriksson, you're getting your net front presence. You're getting a guy who's going to win those battles in front. He's going to go to the wall so that Kaprizov and Zuccarello aren't in a position where they have to dig pucks off the wall. They still can if they need to, but Eriksson is your guy on that line to do that. Zuccarello and Kaprizov, you let them skate. You let them create some space. Second line, I try and recapture that Iowa magic that they had with Boldy and Marco Rossi. and also with Marcus Johansson, who really clicked and kind of unlocked a different level of Boldy in the back half of last season. Quite possibly one of the best deadline moves in Minnesota Wild franchise history, which really isn't saying a lot, but as far as deadline moves go and what it meant for Boldy and getting him his long-term deal as well, that's a line that should have a lot of chemistry heading into things and could light up a scoreboard. Everybody plays well. This bottom six is going to be the biggest pain in the ass bottom six to play against. You go Foligno, Gaudreau, Hartman on your third line, and then you go Dewar, Maroon, and Duhaime, with sprinkling in some Sammy Walker in there as well for some extra speed on that fourth line. That's a fun lineup to watch next season.
Your fourth line needs to stay away from our top line next year.
Oh, that'll be a matchup a couple
stay
times.
away.
See, but then you run it right back and you toss out Perry and you toss out Foligno and you start throwing those guys.
Hold on, we got brother v brother in the Central Division next year now.
We do, and they've played against each other before a couple times. And it's always fun to see, but especially with the rivalry next year, that'll be a fun one to see. Mateo is saying flip Ek and Rossi. Don't take the best player Boldy has had on his line in the NHL away from him. I get it. I do like the chemistry of Ek with Boldy. But I do think you have to at least start with Rossi on F2 and Eriksson Ek on F1. Now, if you decide to change that and you're going to put Rossi with Kaprizov and Zuccarello, eventually, yeah, I could see that. But I have a really hard time putting Rossi as 1C to start next season. Could he earn that role? Absolutely. Should he get opportunities to play with Kaprizov? Absolutely. But I think at the very core of the roster, this almost needs to be how you prioritize things. Because if I'm looking at just across the division and I'm looking at, okay, who's going to line up against Ryan O'Reilly? Who's going to line up against Nathan McKinnon? Who is going to line up against whether you go Pavelski or, whoever? Dallas has like 5 guys who could play 1C if they needed to.
Yeah, that's true.
I want Eriksson Ek to be the one on the ice against those guys. And also so that you're kind of not necessarily sheltering Rossi, but giving him some more favorable matchups against other teams' 2Cs. To me, that is probably the better way to grow him long-term overall. And I could see a position where at the end of the year, Rossi is the 1C at the end of next season. I absolutely love that.
Test him out on the top power play line.
Yep. I think that would probably be
keep him at
your
2C.
Biggest way to tell where he's going to be. Yeah, if he's 1C on the power play, that's an ideal spot for me going into next season. Looking at the defense, this gets a little less cluttered. Let me get that up here. Middleton and Spurgeon, solid pairing. Love that. Brodin and Addison, I could see Faber sliding up into that second pairing role, especially given the, is Addison in Dean Evison's doghouse again? If he is, that will be Faber's spot on D2. Third pairing, Johnny Vibes, John Merrill, or Alex Goligoski, whatever the lineup needs.
God, Alex Goligoski's still playing.
He is. There's still some talk that he may end up on the move. He does have the 35 plus no move contract. He's 37, $2 million cap hit this year and a UFA after that. He won't be back with the Wild next season. He should be somewhere where he could play a decent amount of minutes, but as I look at that roster, he is at best the number 60 man. And I want to get back to a comment from Mateo here earlier on where he said Damon Hunt and or Carson Lambos will play time this year. I wouldn't hate that. I would just like to see both of those guys really show out at Iowa and, turn Iowa into the Central Division champs this year that I think they can be. If you're running Hunt and Lambos and Volstead at Iowa this year, that has the potential to be a special Iowa Wild team that, frankly, they've never had a team that is bursting with as much potential at the AHL level as what Iowa could be running into this year. So
got another big one for you from Mateo.
Love that second pairing, but Russo thinks I'm a dumbass for stating our defensive liability will be put with the best defenseman, like what we did with Dumba the last half decade. Yeah, I don't know. This is one where I don't know if I necessarily agree with Russo, because as I look at that second pairing too, like I understand where Russo is coming from with he knows like what is specifically going on with Addison, why he just can't seem to figure it out in his own end. And Jonas Brodin, like it or not, from a defensive defenseman standpoint, Brodin is a top 5 defenseman in this league. As far as overall, I don't think top 10 is a stretch. But from a purely defensive D-man standpoint, he's as good as it gets. He's right up there with your Jacob Slavins. He's right up there with your Adam Fox. He's, I would say, maybe a little bit below Cale Makar, but not too much. Just as far as a pure shutdown guy, there are a few guys who are harder to play against than Jonas Brodin. So if you're going to put Kalen Addison, who honestly, of the guys on this list, I don't even think is the worst in his own end, on the line with Brodin, who is your best, that maybe is a good way to kind of mitigate that loss a little bit. It's what they do with Merrill and Goligoski that worries me. Like that to me is, as you look at this Wild roster, like that is where the weak point is. That is where kind of the pain point that will need to be addressed in some way is if the Wild are going to make a deeper run. I just don't know I don't know how you fix it internally. I don't know how you fix it externally. Mateo's saying, but he's acting like you face McDavid 82 games a year, not 3. And that the only game where I'm worried about Brodin getting out against one man. It's that bottom pairing is going to be a bit of a pain point. That said, looking at where this team is going to be next year, looking at where this team is going to be 2 and 3 years out, I'm far less worried about that in the long run. That said, I will say, and a couple of other Minnesota podcasts have brought this up, if things are going very poorly for the Wild next year, say they are running into that injury luck, say they are in a position where the young guns aren't panning out like we want them to, I could see a scenario where they try to move Jared Spurgeon at the trade deadline next season. Just looking at your window to compete. Looking at your window to compete, looking at who is still going to be in, like, who do you have inked into your lineup 3 years from now?
Right.
Looking at these guys, I can confidently say Jonas Brodin 3 years from now. I can confidently say Brock Faber 3 years from now. I don't know if I can as comfortably say the other guys on that list. And if you'd asked me last year too, Spurgeon probably still would have seen, but he is 33 now. So as you get through the buyout window, he'll be 35. He'll still be carrying a $7.5 million cap hit, which he did earn, by the way. Let's not discount that. He definitely earned that kind of a contract.
Two years out, they can't move him this year, and Spurgeon won't want to move. Oh, does Spurgeon move close?
He has, I believe, a 10 team. In fact, let me check Cap Friendly here once again. So starting July 1st of 2024, he can submit a 10-team no-trade list. So he's got a partial no-movement clause there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. Trading your captain would be especially when you're a team that is contending, at least playoff contending. I won't say cup contending, but you're at least playoff
and if it's bad, like if it's really
full no move this year, 10-team next year. Yeah.
Okay. So if it is a scenario where it's really bad for the Wild this year, and say there is a team that comes knocking, and maybe the Wild are in a position where, they'll retain some salary to make the deal work, but to add Jared Spurgeon to a playoff roster.
Oh, God, yeah.
And if he's getting calls from teams that are in that mix, I think any GM is a fool to not answer the phone on anybody. Like, nobody in this league is truly immovable. If Gretzky could get traded, anybody can get traded.
That's fair.
That's kind of how I look at it. So
that's
you at least hear the offer. You can weigh later on if it's going to help your team or hurt your team in the long run, but at least hear what the offer is before you just outright shut it down.
Was the exact reason I had to use when everybody was like, what do you mean you're accepting Kane being traded? I'm like, Gretzky got traded in this league, man. Anybody can get traded.
Anybody can. Mateo with a question that I'm going to get to real quick because we're kind of running out of time here a little bit, but I do want to answer this one. Is Ek the next captain for the Wild? That
can I answer, even though obviously I don't know as much.
I'll let you go for it. Sure.
It's not deep. This is more of just it's personal opinion. God, no. Nothing wrong with the guy because he's definitely got the best name ever. But
I see what you did there.
You don't pronounce my name Jewel, but whatever.
That's
you
true.
Could. Anyway, leadership wise, I'm sure he's probably up there. There's a reason he's asking. I don't know how that doesn't go to it. If Spurgeon is moved, or for whatever reason, if Spurgeon is no longer a Minnesota Wild player as early as this year or next year, whatever.
Yeah, Spurgeon keeps the C while he's here, like full stop.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah.
There is no Blake Wheeler going on here.
Yep.
I would probably put my money on your next captain if Spurgeon moves, being Boldy or Kaprizov.
Yeah, I think those are maybe a little more logical. I could even see Jonas Brodin potentially as one of your captains there as well.
That's fair too, exactly.
But it's going to be whoever they view as really the leader of this young group, and not just your captain doesn't always have to be the player who is your quote unquote best player. And that's in a lot of cases it is, but it doesn't always have to be.
It doesn't have to be, and that's why I preface me bringing Kaprizov in there and saying I would put Boldy ahead of Kaprizov.
Maybe I could kind of see that. So
I mean, but if you're going younger, the young star versus the already established superstar.
Yeah, that said, love Eriksson Ek. Love that guy. Wouldn't have any problem with him being captain.
That's something we didn't even talk about for last week's show. I'll talk about that when we get to the closer to the season.
What? Who's going to be the
Hawks captain? We don't have a captain. Yeah, we don't have a. Well, heading into next year, we won't have one. But it's just I forgot to cover that because it still hasn't sunk in that Taves is gone. Anyway.
Yeah, Mateo. One last point here. If it's Garrett deciding, I think Ek would be named captain if Guerin is the one who makes that call. But to me, Dino is the one who makes that call.
Your GM typically isn't the one making that call.
Yeah, it's the coach. It's the coach and it's the players. So that is it for tonight's show. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. We are off next week, so our next show will be Tuesday, August 8th, 8 Eastern, 7 Central.
Don't miss us too much.
I'm going to go stuff my face with croissants. Joel is going to go get drunk on that whiskey. Keep the pours going. You know what? I'll lean into it. It's a Monday. You got a long week ahead, my guy. I do, but I got to go into the office tomorrow, so I don't think going in hungover is on the docket for a Tuesday. He's Jewel Fernino. I'm Dan Bradley. Well done. Enjoy the rest of your night, everybody.